We're really quite exclusive. We are exclusively for private landlords. We were set up to support private landlords in getting, for instance, a Worcester Bosch boiler into a rental property for an unbeatable price. A lot of our manufacturers that we work with, and we're doing millions and millions of pounds with them every single year, we are to them a cherry on top. We are a direct route to a really fragmented market, being private landlords. We're interested in looking after the little guy. We've got 5,500 members, about 40,000 properties, but yeah, there's tens of thousands potentially on the table to be saved.
Welcome to this week's episode of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, joined by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again. And I'm here in sunny Sussex at the farm today. So I don't have my usual background. So, we'll be a little static today, but nothing static about the content.
No, absolutely not. No, we have Anthony Bailey-Grice as our guest today. And Anthony is the MD of LNPG. And LNPG are the largest buying group for private landlords in the UK. And they've got 5,500 landlords. And they negotiate fantastic prices with major national suppliers throughout the power of their contract pricing. So you're really putting leverage to good effect.
That's something to debrief, the concept of contract pricing. I've never heard anybody talk about contract pricing. We all know there are prices for anything, when you're exchanging value. Let's debrief that when we come back after we've listened and see whether this idea of contract pricing and negotiation could be part of a true wealth builder's DNA. So we look for it and we help people to do that. I know we do it in our own way, but it'd be good to see if we can't get some of our members suggesting ways that we couldn't contract a price on behalf of the wealth builder community as well as the LNPG community. How about that?
Anthony, welcome to Wealth Talk today. How are you?
I'm very well, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to discussing your business today, which is LNPG. And I know that many of our listeners are property investors. So in fact, many of them may well already be members of yours. But for those who haven't come across LNPG, let's start there. Tell us, what is LNPG?
LNPG is the UK's largest buying group for private landlords. Now, that's a bit of a marketing tagline. What it is, we've gathered about 5,500 landlords. That's where we are right now. Obviously, we didn't start with 5,500, and we care about getting great product quality into rental properties. So rather than just going for the cheap option, getting something really that's going to be the real McCoy product and bringing it down to realms of affordability. So our key USP is getting access to contract pricing, really bringing the price of these products down for our members.
Yeah, and you're the managing director now, Anthony, but you've worked your way through the ranks, haven't you?
I have, yes. I think you described it yesterday when we were talking as a meteoric rise, or was that me? Yeah, I've been MD at NMPG for 2.5, 3 years, something like that. Previously, initially I joined as the marketing manager, and my plan, to be completely frank with you, was I planned to stay for a year or two, kind of deal with all the partners that we work with. So we got 65 partners, and kind of get acclimated with how these different businesses worked in the same way that a marketing agency does, where you're kind of dealing with lots of accounts at the same time, get a lot of really good on the ground experience. And then my plan was to move on, and I was going to move on from the business, and I was going to move on from Leicester, where we're based. I was going to move to a big city, London, Sheffield, Manchester, something like that. But I got here and there were a few things that I wanted to do. And then that list became a little bit longer, and then a little bit longer, and a little bit longer. And I've been ticking things off, not just adding things to the pile. And I just really enjoyed it. So I've kind of stuck around for much longer than originally planned, but I plan to be here for even longer.
And you speak quite regularly as well, don't you, at property networking events across the UK?
I do. They had to drag me up on stage for that one originally. So again, not something that I ever planned on doing. Originally, Nick, who is the founder of LNPG, and Paul Hilliard, who is our ops director, kind of split the circuit between them. Nick now lives over in Portugal, and as part of my changing role, he said, look, Ant, I really want you to get on stage and start talking about LNPG. We do loads of webinars as well, and you can see, because we've got all of these recorded on our website, my transition from sitting on a webinar and just being a face that doesn't say anything, every now and then asks a question, but really quite nervously sitting there and hoping that no one says anything that goes over my head, to now where I'm kind of controlling the entire thing. And it's been a really gradual transition in order to do that. Originally something I really didn't want to do, but I really enjoy it now.
Well, we've already touched on so many elements that make up a great wealth talk, talking about different asset classes, whether that be property, business, building your own brand, building IP. And we're going to touch on lots of this today. But coming back to the core element of LNPG, what the business does, who does it serve specifically? Who can join, who can't join?
So we're really quite exclusive, I would say. We are exclusively for private landlords. That is our core market. And not just that, if you are not a private landlord, you're not able to join. We were set up to support private landlords in product specification, in getting, for instance, a Worcester Bosch boiler into a rental property for a really, really competitive price, but much more than competitive, to be honest, an unbeatable price. And we have to stick to that market. A lot of our manufacturers that we work with, and we're doing millions and millions of pounds with them every single year, but we are to them a cherry on top. We are a direct route to a really fragmented market, being private landlords. And if we were to leak out and let a few tradespeople join and start buying and reselling products and that kind of thing, then the contracts will be pulled. So we have to stick to private landlords. And, we're interested in looking after the little guy. We've got 5,500 members, about 40,000 properties. On average, that's, 7 or 8 properties per member. So we're not talking about gigantic national build for rent suppliers. We're talking about individual landlords.
For a landlord, coming to you, it just gives a bit of an idea about the range of things that they might be able to purchase and acquire through their membership.
Off the top of my head, I don't think I'd be able to say everything. We've got 65, 70 suppliers now. And when I first joined, we had a little under 2,000 members. We had about a dozen suppliers. And my first job for the first probably 2 years or so was testing and onboarding suppliers one after the other to try and fill all of the gaps that you need for a typical refurb and maintenance of properties. So our main area of expertise, I would say, is physical products. It's things like boilers, kitchens, paint, bathrooms, that kind of thing. We've extended that quite significantly now, but nowadays I would say, another marketing tagline really is everything that you need for a typical refurb. Now, there are some gaps in that for specialist items. There's some geographical gaps, but typically nationally, we work with Magnet Kitchens. We work with Wolseley, who are a plumbing and heating supplier, and they do bathrooms as well, with Johnson's Paint, Jewson, loads and loads and loads of big brands. But we've also got quite a few little ones as well that tend to go unnoticed and kind of the unsung heroes of the membership.
So we're talking about potentially, thousands of pounds that could be saved, just even in one refurb, I guess, right? And to give an idea of what a typical membership fee might be, what does that look like?
Membership fees either $199, $299 or $399, depending on how many properties you've got. So it's a tiered discount scheme, again, with the ethos of looking after the little guy. And the idea is that if you have 25 properties, 30 properties, you're going to make more use of it. You're going to save, as you say, tens of thousands of pounds in any given year. Therefore, you can afford to pay a little bit more, whereas the smaller guys can't do that. But yeah, there's tens of thousands potentially on the table to be saved.
Yeah, and that's an annual fee, right? We're not talking monthly here.
That's an annual fee. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think, fantastic value. And I know so many people who've benefited from the services that you provide there. So we've talked about then, obviously the value that you can bring to property landlords, investors in the UK. Interested here also to think about, the business side of things. So from your perspective, running and growing LNPG in the way that you have over the last few years. And a membership business is great. Obviously, WealthBuilders is a membership business as well. And it's great for recurring income and predictability. So as a business owner, Anthony, why is recurring income so important?
Well, yeah, I've worked on both sides of it. So before now, I was working for a manufacturer. It's kind of how I got into the contract market in the first place. Now, of course, working for LNPG, it's the membership side. And I think the membership certainly makes more sense to me because you say you've got that recurring income. You're not constantly filling a bucket with an empty hole down at the bottom where you're constantly chasing new business. I think there's a culture in some aspects of business in this country where the new customer is king and the old customer, the one customer, is not really worth thinking about. So you tend to get a degradation of service over time that they're not really even aware of. With membership, it's completely different. Of course, new customers are brilliant, but retaining what you've already got as well is really key. So there's a few ways that we do that, but one philosophy that we have and that we've always stuck by is we don't allow is the wrong word. We don't encourage anyone to join without fully realizing what they're getting into. So what we don't want to do is oversell anything and say, this is the best thing since sliced bread. You're never going to have any problems. The reality is that there are problems all the time in property and in purchasing products for property. So understanding what it is you're able to get, what prices you're able to get, and where things go wrong and how they can be resolved is really, really important, because we don't want to bring someone on board just for that first year and then they decide, no, it's not worth it. At that point, it's not a membership. Of course, we've got a churn rate as well of others dropping off and dropping out of the industry. But the main thing for us is doing things in a way where we're looking after a lot of smaller accounts, a lot of smaller individuals, rather than trying to chase the big whales of, something that's going to bring in £1 million a year, for instance, because the second that you lose that business, that's you done. All of a sudden your overheads have gone up and you can't afford to pay for them anymore. For us, looking after smaller individuals, especially in this market where they've previously been neglected, and that's kind of why we exist to begin with. If you lose a few, fine. I'd rather not lose any, but that's life. They can be replaced and we can continue to grow and thrive as a business, especially given the last couple of years where landlords, to be honest, have been hit quite severely through taxation and regulation and interest changes and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. And you touched briefly there on sort of the beginnings of things. And there's always a reason why behind a business, isn't there? And you mentioned the founders as well. Nick, tell us a bit more about the story, because it's an interesting one as kind of how LNPG really got going.
Sure. Well, yeah, I joined in 2017, so 8 years ago now. And I'm kind of only part of the second half of the story. To be honest, I'm part of the easier part of the story, because with a buying group and any kind of membership organization, I'm sure you guys had the same at WealthBuilders. Once you've got proof of concept and once you've got, a few customers through the door, you can then build on that. It becomes a snowball effect where, especially for us, our buying power grows with the amount of customers that we've got. So the more customers, the more buying power, the better it is for those customers. Therefore, it's easier to attract more, and your buying power grows again and again and again. So it's really, really good when you've got those initial customers through the door. What's really, really difficult is starting off to begin with. So LNPG launched as a business, as I say, before my time, but it was in 2011. Actually, the concept was brought about in 2006. So what happened in 2006? In the East Midlands, a few of the councils had made a decision that for LHA tenants, housing benefit tenants effectively, they would, rather than pay the landlord the rent directly, they would pay the tenant the rent, and the tenant's job was to then budget and allocate resources and then pay the landlord. So that was a decision that they made 20 years ago now. The immediate issue with that all of the landlords in Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Leicestershire were complaining about and saying this is what's going to happen, which obviously did happen, was that the tenants would get a load of money, be expected to budget it, but this is more money than they've had in one go in their life ever. So what would happen is all of a sudden, all of these wants and needs and other things would start to take priority. And by the time it came to pay the rent for that property, they'd have no money left. So the landlords started to suffer. They started to get fewer rent payments. They started to get kind of more of a lumpy kind of payment schedule. And they would go back to the council, and the council would say, well, it's not our fault, we paid the tenant. So it became a real nightmare. What the council did was alienate the private rental market really dramatically. And I know that the government and private landlords as two sectors really do tend to alienate one another quite a lot. This was really severe in the region at the time. So the council decided, okay, what do? We need to figure out how we get the landlords back on side, because at the end of the day, they need the landlords to provide the housing for these tenants in the first place. Otherwise, they would just turn the tenants away. They called a meeting, huge meeting with dozens of councils. Nick, who's the founder of LNPG, private landlord with properties up in northern Nottinghamshire, went to this meeting, and he was thrust on stage expecting there to be 2 or 3 individuals. There was about 100 people at this meeting, given a microphone and asked, okay, what do we do? How do we get the private landlords back on side? Because what we can't do is reverse that decision that we've already made. That's been made. What else can we do for the sector? Now, Nick's answer was very simple. It was effectively the ethos of LNPG. It was, we're looking after your tenants, regardless of where that tenant is living in a social housing providing property or a private landlord provided property. Their life should be the same. The quality of that home should be the same. You're paying, at the time, I don't know, £600 for a Worcester Bosch boiler. We're paying £1,000 for a Worcester Bosch boiler, because they had the buying power. They had the roots in with these manufacturers to bring down the price and negotiate really as a block. Private landlords didn't. So Nick suggested, well, let us into that. We'll be able to upgrade the properties, add more value to these properties, add more value to these tenants' lives, and it will mean that we have to be working together. We'll be forced to work together. It sounds like a brilliant idea on the surface. And to be honest, it is a brilliant idea. But the council said, no, we can't do that, because they are regulated out the wazoo. They have to make sure a million different things go right before they're able to get that price in the first place. And they said, it's a great idea, but no, we can't do that. So that was 2006. Over the next 5 years, Nick decided, well, that's something that I'm going to put together anyway. And if you've ever seen Nick speak or spoken to Nick in the past, he is, if anything, dogged. He doesn't let things go. So he spent 5 years going from manufacturer to manufacturer to manufacturer. What price can you give me to get access, exclusive access to the private landlord market? And he had no customers. So no customers equals no contracts equals no customers. Eventually, 2011, someone took a punt on him. It was Baxi, actually, was our first contract. And we got our first member. Our first member, as it happens, Chris, I was listening to one of your podcasts just yesterday, was Raj Barry, who you were speaking to a few weeks ago and is the co-editor of YPN. He was our first member. From that moment, I'm not going to say it's all been really, really easy, because it's not, but it has been 10 times easier when you have that proof of concept.
Yeah, I love hearing the stories of where businesses, obviously got their initial idea, always identifying a problem that's out there, but it's like that typical iceberg, isn't it, where you don't see the years of hard work that sit underneath the water, and great foundations there, and obviously great to see the business flourishing now. And in terms of your sort of day-to-day role in the business, then, are you the person responsible for negotiating new contracts now?
Absolutely. I mean, as I say, the job is so much easier now, because my job today is much more turning away potential partners than it is chasing them. There are, I would say maybe 10 to 20 a week, different phone calls that I get of, we would love to have access to this, we'd love to have access to that, which is in theory great. But there's only so many resources, and sometimes you notice with manufacturers sometimes, or partners or suppliers, that they just don't really get it. I think the industry in a lot of ways is 20 years behind. As I say, I was previously, before this, I was at a manufacturer, and it was my job to win contract business. So I was cold calling businesses and saying, can we set up an appointment? Who do you want to talk to about your showers? No one wanted to talk to me about showers, let me tell you that. But I still had to try and have that conversation. But really, my job was to put a number in a box. It was to say, I have got a meeting here and they are going to do 800 showers and they're going to buy that over the next 2 years. The reality and what I put in that box were never quite the same thing, because even if they said they were going to do it, they weren't necessarily going to do it. One thing that we at LNPG can't do is put a number in that box. We can never say we guarantee that we are going to be buying X or Y, because it's not down to us. We ask for the best proposition we can possibly get for our members. We promise the manufacturers that we will help you in educating the market, in marketing your products, in letting everyone know that you're here, and that if you need, for instance, I don't know, let's say a shower, then this is the place to go to because of the product quality, because of the manufacturer's guarantee behind it, because of the price, etc., etc., etc. It's then down to the member, actually, do they want to buy it or do they not want to buy it? And sometimes we get stuck at that point where the manufacturer says, well, that's all well and good, but I've got to go back to my boss and prove why I need to give you this extra special price. And that's not always possible, because I'm not going to tell them we will buy 500, we will buy 1,000, we will buy however much. In reality, we spent £7 million with Magnet last year. We're their biggest customer in the UK. We don't have a number in a box to say that that's what we're ever going to do, because it's not down to us. They've got to lead with their best proposition. And it's kind of backwards for a lot of manufacturers.
And just for anyone who hasn't used LNPG, after registration, after becoming a member, what happens? You get access to all of the suppliers and you just buy direct? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different answers to that question, to be honest. One thing that we do at LNPG, and to be honest, was I don't know why I took the job to begin with, because as I say, I started off as the marketing manager, and I was at a manufacturer before. And the manufacturer, LNPG, had walked into the manufacturer. There was that whole argument about, can you put a number in that box? And LNPG had said no. And we said, well, thank you, but no thank you. And I was the only one scratching my head saying, well, this actually sounds like a really good idea. So I'd already kind of decided that working as a customer might be a little bit more fun than working as a supplier, because you're the one getting wined and dined rather than trying to wine and dine people that aren't really interested. So I kind of made the leap at that point. But one thing that I didn't know at the time is kind of now an everyday difficulty for us, is that PG cannot advertise our pricing anywhere. So we've spoken a little bit today about, I can get great pricing on this, unbeatable pricing on boilers, kitchens, yada, yada, yada. 65 different suppliers, thousands upon thousands of individual products, where we have used our buying power to negotiate unbeatable pricing. The catch is, I cannot tell you what that pricing is. If you go to our website, lnpg.co.uk, you'll see some of the same great claims. You'll see some explanations about what we do, how contract pricing works, but you won't find any pricing for any of the products anywhere. So what it takes to join LNPG, although we do, webinars and I do talks and that kind of thing where we do kind of explain and do talk about pricing a little bit, it does take a leap of faith. It takes someone saying, I trust that they're going to follow up with what their promises are. And in this industry, that's not always the case. You will have others that will happily take the money and then not follow up with what they're going to do. So in terms of actually our members, our onboarding process is really, really, really key. We want to make sure that people understand every aspect of what it is that they want to buy. So for instance, people are going to join with a specific reason. No one's going to sign up today and say, well, it sounded like a nice idea. I might need something in 6 months' time, so I thought I'll get it out of the way now, because they're wasting 6 months worth of membership. What they'll do is they'll wait until something goes wrong. They need a new boiler, they need a new kitchen, and then they'll pick up the phone. They say, I need to join. I want to see what prices you can get, etc., etc. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll focus on what is that pain point area. If you need a new kitchen in the next couple of weeks, we need to make sure that you have that account ready, that you know what the pricings are, that you know what the process is, so we can get you that new kitchen. We've got to sort out that pain point first and make it worth your while. Following that, we will talk about, we've got getting started calls, getting started webinars, emails, every method of communication that we could possibly think of to educate that member on here's how best to use it. And here's how to avoid some of the common pitfalls that other members have fallen in over the years. Of course, we hear about all of it because every single thing that goes wrong comes back to us and we resolve. So, I mean, to answer your question, I've kind of gone around the houses a little bit, but if you were to join and want to use Magnet, you would go to Magnet. We would set up an account with you, on your behalf, with our pricing already loaded. You would go to Magnet and just order it through that account. So you go in and say, I'm an LNPG member. Same is true for virtually any other of our partners, although the actual logistics of doing it are slightly different. So we always like to walk you through that before you do it.
Yeah, sure. I understand that. So not only are you bringing great quality products at a great price, but also another added benefit is the community that you've built now. So I know your Facebook group has about 10,000 members, right?
I mean, for us, that is the real key to all of this. That's why we've done all of this. The Facebook group is fantastic because it's a real kind of key area for landlords to sit there and talk till the cows come home about products and product quality. There's an awful lot of education in terms of how to be a landlord. There's a lot that you need to know just to get kind of the basics right, how to get high cash flowing strategy, how to kind of grow the portfolio, that kind of thing. We're not interested in that. Well, we are interested in that, but that's not what we're best at. There's a million different people covering that. What is very difficult to find is rather unbiased information on different products and product quality, because a lot of people think of it as a linear scale. The more expensive a product's going to be, the better quality it's going to be. And that is sometimes the case, but not always the case. So when it comes to refurbing a property, for instance, there's an expectation on landlords to be product experts in absolutely everything. They've got to know a great heating system from a poor heating system. They've got to know great flooring and what kind of how long that's going to last as well. They've got to know about paint, about kitchens, about bathrooms, about building materials, all of these different things that there's really no way for them to know about. Now, they can put that trust in their builder and hope that the builder is going to be looking after them in that regard. And a lot of them do, and some of them don't. But they've also got to be thinking about it from their industry. And I'll give you an example. In paint. Paint is one of our most talked about subjects. It's such an undervalued aspect of a refurb because it's the last thing that you do. And typically when we think about paints, we think about color. We only ever think about, I want this white wall to be blue, so I'm going to buy some blue paint. Now, we know that there's cheap paint and we know that there's expensive paint, but we don't really know why that is. So what we tend to do is a bit like when you buy wine at a restaurant, you kind of go for one that's on the cheaper side, but not the absolute cheapest, because the absolute cheapest is going to be awful. You don't want people knowing you've bought that one. So you buy the second or third cheapest instead to kind of look like you've got an idea of what you're doing. That's fine. Oh, the wine is only going to last for one meal. And to be honest, I don't know about you, Chris, but I could not tell the difference anyway. So it doesn't really matter to me. With paint, you are painting that property, and then it becomes your biggest maintenance expense for that property going forward. Because every time you've got tenants moving in and moving out, you repaint that property because there's marks on the wall or average wear, and you try and wipe those marks off, and the paint comes with it. So what do? You spend more time, effort, energy, get someone in, buy more products, and you buy the same products again because you think that's what paint is, and you do it again. And you do that the next year, and the next year, and the next year, and the next year. I was talking to a landlord in Oxford who has got 40 HMOs and had a painter going through number 1 through to number 40 consecutively. And as soon as number 40 was done, go back to number 1. It was like painting the fourth?
Yeah, like the fourth bridge, yeah.
Painting them again and again and again, because that's what he thought you had to do. He thought that's just paint. if you were to switch over, so we work with a company called Johnson's Trade. Johnson's have got a retail arm and they've got a trade arm as well. They're one of the biggest manufacturers in the world. The trade stuff is 10 times the quality of the retail stuff. One paint I would recommend, and we recommend this to all of our members, is a paint called the acrylic durable matte. That's a Johnson's paint. There's a Dulux equivalent. There's a Crown equivalent as well, the trade versions. Acrylic durable matte has got a class 1 scrub rating, which means if you mark the wall, you can scrub it up to 2,000 times. The mark comes off, the paint stays on the wall. So you don't get any chalky finish. It looks as good as new. So all of a sudden, you use that stuff, and it's a little bit more expensive than retail, but you only have to paint it once. You don't need to paint it a million times consecutively, again and again and again and again, slowly bringing the walls of your property in and in with all the different coats. How on earth is a landlord supposed to know that? There's just no way. So the space that we've been able to provide and the kind of crowdsourcing of information through manufacturers and through our members as well, and being really close to our customer has helped us to develop these kind of tips and tricks in an information hub. We've got hundreds of webinars on our website with different manufacturers over a series of 15 years or so, where we're able to say, hold on, why are you doing it that way? And it's typically because they've not thought about it.
Yeah, well, that's a great tip. And even that alone is worth the membership, isn't it? But so much more value within that community and that face group specifically. So anyone who wants to take a closer look at LNPG, what you offer, what would you suggest is the best thing for them to do?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said, we've got the Facebook group, so it's just called LNPG. So we've got a page and we've got a group as well. If you're involved in property, welcome to join that. You don't have to be a member of LNPG to join, but you can start to see kind of the conversations that we're having and get some real life stories from members. We've got the website, lnpg.co.uk, although, of course, the issue with that is that we don't talk about price that much. We do monthly webinars as well. So we do something called a non-members webinar. That's myself and a member of the team. I did one a few days ago where we sit down for an hour and we kind of take people under the bonnet of this is what an LNPG membership looks like. We talk about prices of some of the key products as well. So you can start to see black and white. Okay, is it worth it? Is it not worth it for your particular circumstance? We talk about where things go wrong. We give, product tips similar to the one about paint that I mentioned. So if you can listen to me talk about the tips of what makes a good boiler, kitchen, I mean, it does get pretty boring pretty quick. So we try to have fun if we can. There's a few different ways, but I think really the webinar is the best way of understanding what it's like and what we're like as well.
That sounds like a great place. And I'm sure if you can share a link with me, I will put that in today's show notes. So if you're listening now, click on the show notes, click the link, and you can register, join that free webinar, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. And it's been so good having you on the podcast today. Thank you very much for sharing. Good luck with your business moving forward. And I'm sure we'll cross paths again very, very soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. That went by quick.
Always does when we have a good conversation.
Good to see you, Chris. All the best.
Okay, interesting conversation there with Anthony. Really enjoyed that. And before we dive into some of those wealth lessons, Kevin, let's dive into Trustpilot. And we've had a good one today from Phil, who says, have had coaching with Wealth Builders for a while now, and they know their stuff, a clear system to help you grow your wealth. Recommended. Thank you, Phil. And yeah, I remember having a call with Phil just a few weeks ago, and thank you for your words there.
Always nice to reconnect with members and always like to see how they progress as well, once they've fledged, if you like, from Wealth Builders, which is, always a pleasure to see that.
Okay, so talking about business, talking about property today, lots of things covered there, I guess encapsulated in the Wealth Builders model of 7 pillars of wealth. Think about creating multiple streams of income, and property investors sometimes get a little bit focused on property, don't they? And obviously, harder to make profits in property over the last few years, the government making changes, interest rates, all of these things. So if you can reduce some of those costs, that's obviously going to help towards the bottom line.
Well, anything that focuses on your ROI is a critical thing to focus on. And if you know that you're developing property, you're spending money in improving value, some of that improving of the value is intellectual. It's what you know. But quite a bit of it is what you do, how you improve it. And that improvement, if it means instilling some kind of equipment, some kind of kitchen or, whatever it would be, that's hardware, then if you can negotiate or have negotiated already prices ahead of time, which LNPG have done brilliantly well, and loving the niche that they're in, by the way. Got to say that's a niche that was probably quite hard to get established because of the kind of fragmented nature of property people, but also being determined to help, the average landlord. I think it's great. And you can tell the grit and determination that's been put into by all the contributors in LNPG, from Nick to Paul to Anthony, even though I know you can't say his name very well.
Double-barreled name gets me every time there. So some parallels with Wealth Builders as well, aren't there? We're a membership business, of course. Anthony talked about, memberships really focus you on delivering value and ongoing value. And we know all about that, of course. And we also know that relying on one of anything is risky. And he talked about a business that relies on just one or two big customers or clients is risky.
Yeah, well, picking up on both of those points, the whole concept of deciding to have a membership business is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you're not depending on lumpy sums of money, as a chunky contribution, if you like. But the other is, you're quite right. You have to stay focused, and I like it because you stay focused on what's the outcome you want for your client, your customer or member, however you frame that language. And it keeps you on your toes intellectually. As a team, we're always on our toes, aren't we? Looking for better ways to add value to our membership. So I think, like Anthony, I'm pleased we have a membership business, and I'm pleased that they do keep us on our toes. And we're constantly on the lookout for new ways to negotiate on behalf of our own members, not with kitchen companies and boiler companies and paint and all those sorts of things, not hardware so much. But certainly in terms of tax benefits, legal benefits that are probably more white collar and service driven. We've got an immense black book, haven't we, of just great contacts where we negotiate some sort of discount, enhancements and value for our members. And our co-director, Paul Brooks, runs that very well, which is called the Wealth Hub. I'm always on the lookout. Every single week, I have a target to, bring in more good quality people who are outstanding in their niche. So this is a company who are outstanding in their niche. Wealth Builders are outstanding in their own niche. And if you as a listener or somebody who's just brilliant at what they do, then connect us, because isn't it great when you surround yourself with masters of what they do?
Sure is. Yeah, sure is. So if you'd like to tap into some of those discounts that LNPG provide their members, then do jump on the free webinar. I'll put the link in today's show notes, or request to join the LNPG Facebook group. Over 10,000 members there, really good conversations. And a great tip about the paint from Anthony towards the end there. Okay, so thanks for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, if you think you know somebody who might benefit from listening, do hit the share button and spread the word. And Kevin, you and I will be back same time, same place next week.
We will indeed, my friend. And until then, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the Wealth Builders membership site to help you create, build and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.